What is up, everybody? It is your girl, Lauren Reed from the Lauren Reed Live Show on What Are Ice Radio. How is everyone doing tonight? Jay, you're in the building. What's going on?
I'm doing good. I'm not I can't complain. Today was a beautiful day. First time I've seen sun in like 80 days, but it's been good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, the snow thing is like next level. Like every
I'm
time we turn
over it.
around, I know every time we turn around is like another snowstorm coming. And
Yeah.
like the other day it was only supposed to be like an inch, and we got like 5 inches, and it's just like, all right, we've had enough. We get it, right? The
Yeah,
groundhog was
but
right, right?
yeah, I mean it's winter, we're in the East Coast, so I get it.
Yeah, I mean, especially coming off of last year where we really didn't have a winter at all.
It
So
snowed
it just
once and it didn't even stick. So I'm like, all right, we're making up for lost time.
this is what's happening, right? But we can
Right.
smell, trying to smell summer, right?
Yeah.
Fall and summer. So we'll see what happens. But we are back here tonight with another great episode of Lauren Reed Live, and we're really excited about our guest tonight because this is definitely a different wheelhouse for us, right?
Yeah.
So we are used to having artists on the show to kind of talk about, how they got their start and the kind of music they do, and talk about how the industry affects them. But we never really talk to anyone that's really like behind the scenes with everything.
Right. And this is the stuff I love. I love the how to like how things get made portion of everything. So I'm excited for this.
I figured that you would enjoy this because you really like how it's built and put together, and like the behind the scenes of it all, not really in the spotlight, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I really appreciate that too, because we sit down and we talk about music all the time, and especially when we talk about like the production part of the music process, and like
Yeah.
the beats and the sound and the quality, because there's so much more stuff that goes along with it, right?
It's a
So
lot. It's a lot. Producers are A&R. They're
right.
beat makers. They're composers. They're almost therapists sometimes. So like, and as I watch different documentaries and just content on my favorite producers and their favorite producers, you learn about all this stuff and what they go through in the studio and prepping
Yeah.
for the artist they're about to work with.
And then no one ever talks about who works with the producers. Like we never talk about the people who make you sound great, right? The
Right.
engineer part of it. We never talk about that. It's almost like they're kind of like the ghosts of like the whole process, but they really make the process go. So
Exactly.
I thought it would be a great idea to talk to someone who is behind the scenes and who is that person that makes the sound quality what it is when you hear your favorite song.
Nice and
So
crisp.
nice and crisp. And they make the vocalists sound good too. Let's not forget that. But we'll let him talk. We'll let
Yes.
him talk about that when he comes on. So without further ado, this gentleman has 20 years in the game and being a music engineer. He has worked with some of your favorite artists. Some to mention is The Game, DJ Khaled, Christina Milian, Mary J. Blige, you name it. He's probably worked with them. And he has tons and tons of credits. And he just released a book to all of you engineers. Oh, I did it. I did it right. I did it right, right? To all those engineers out there, it's called Ear Hustling, the Studio Blueprint. So without further ado, Mr. Robert Big Brizz Brisbane, please come on to the show.
There he is.
What's happening,
There
everybody?
it is. What is up? What's up, Brizz?
Blessed to be here. Thank you guys for having me so much. I really appreciate it.
We are excited about this. Like we just said, me and Jay talk music all the time. Like we can do it like all day long, right?
Absolutely.
We send each other stuff throughout the day about just different stuff that's going on in the music industry.
We be having debates like through DMs and arguments and be like, yo, people are wild. How do they say this is not a vocalist?
Right.
I live and breathe music.
We talk about it all, like, from current to back in the day, whatever it is. So this is a different topic for us because we're so used to having artists on the show. So before we jump into the book, let's just talk about you a little bit. So talk to us about how you started and got into the industry, and why you chose the engineer route.
Okay. So it's kind of funny because I first came in as an artist, an accidental artist. Really, I was through high school, even before then, everybody I think raps and stuff like that, right? And then it wasn't until I was a little bit before college, right out of high school, I met a friend of mine named Joe Hound. He had a production deal with a small independent label in Miami, and I was actually living. Him and his cousin and I were roommates, and I was just in there. Where everybody starts freestyling or whatever. And then one day he comes and he's like, "Yo, I got this beat. Can you write something to it?" So I wrote it. He heard it. He was like, "All right, we're gonna go to the studio and we'll record or whatever." And then I'm just, at this point, I've been to a couple people's houses, worked like been around turntables and like DJs. Like, Miami's it's a real like DJ type of town. Like DJs is all over. Everybody's throwing parties in the park or whatever. So I've always had that kind of level of experience with like, the music and technology part of it. But when we got to that studio, um, it was something else. And the two executive producers were Cool and Dre, who he had been going to high school with. And so that's how we all kind of met. This was 98, maybe 99. So from there, I came in and started working on his project. But I was so like enamored with the whole process. And back then, like, it wasn't like what it is today with like computers and everything like that. Everything back then was tape machines. Like it was like it would look like they had something called ADATs or DA88 tape machines where these were like,
it's like a reel.
Yeah, it's like a reel. Well, they had those. Those were first. Those are like reel to reel. Those are either 1/2 inch or 2-inch tapes that had multi tracks on them.
Right.
Then they graduated onto where these ADATs, they kind of look like VHS tapes.
Ah, yeah, okay.
And then from there, they had like the mini VHS tapes called DA88s. And basically all these things do is just multi-tracks, like it's just tracks after tracks. So I was just totally blown away by this process because until then, everything was recording onto like a tape deck or something like that, or like a microphone, a tape deck. You had the instrumental playing on one side, you know, doing your thing on the other side. So this
or like back in the day, the Play School.
Exactly.
Playing.
Exactly.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So it was definitely like a whole nother world to me. And the engineers back then, we're talking, like I said, this was like 1995 onward is when, hip hop started actually getting like major budgets, right? So
yes.
Everything up until that point, the major studios and everything, they were all built based on what the previous top reigning, I guess you could say the chart topping genre was, which was like rock, metal, stuff like that, country, like
pop,
and pop even back then was like just it was the biggest thing. It was like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, but the rock guys were like the real studios, right? So all the studios and everything were built from like, Miami, we had like the Bee Gees, and then like in Southwest Florida, there was like Leonard Skinner, like swamp rock type thing.
Right.
So, but these are the people that were building these studios. So when you think of like Criteria, Hit Factory, and stuff like that, they were all based around either funk, disco, rock, or something like that. What I'm trying to say is Black people weren't really running these studios or in them like that. I think there may have been one or two Black engineers that we all knew about. Jimmy Douglas, who worked with like Timbaland and a whole slew of other people, and like Teddy Riley's engineers, but they didn't own the studios. So the engineers that were in the room usually are the guys mixing the records with these old rock guys, and they're sitting here mixing rap and everything, and you kind of just got the air of it not being, because it wasn't their music. You
got to have a different ear for it.
Exactly. There was a disconnect from it. And me, I was always an inquisitive type of person. I was always kind of tech savvy. So I'd be asking a whole lot of questions, and I could tell I was getting on these guys' nerves.
Sure.
So it wasn't until a friend of mine was going to UCF in Orlando that I ended up going out there to visit him. And I really went out there chasing a girl who actually turned out to be 20 years later, fast forward, my wife. But we met in Orlando. I ended up staying in Orlando because my friend had just started going to UCF there and everything like that, and I wasn't really doing too much. And that's how I kind of came across Full Sail. Mm-hmm. And because some people in his dorm had heard the music that we were making in Miami. He was like, "Oh, you should come to my school because my school
Yeah.
has like a studio in it." And I was like,
Right.
and really it was maybe they'll let you use it.
Right. like full scale is actually a college for like engineering and sound and all that stuff.
It's like sound, film. He was going
Right.
for film. He was in there for film, digital media, computer animation. It's a multimedia school. And so when I went on a tour and they were like, "You guys show me how to do this," I was like, "Well, then sign me up." You know what I mean?
Right.
So I ended up just going there. And because I already had a little bit of experience, I pretty much I was successful with like the level of education. It's almost like I knew what questions I wanted answers to. And it just became part of me. So that by the time I got back home to Miami, when I graduated and got back home to Miami, Cool and Dre had already started really making their names in the producing world, and it kind of all just lined up that way. So they were like, "Oh, Brizz is back. Brizz, you went to Full Sail. Won't you start recording some of the artists that we want to work with?" Or I actually started by assisting at Cool's house, and then he had built a studio in his garage, and then from there it just graduated. We ended up getting a deal and a publishing deal and a production deal and a joint venture.
Around this time, this is what, like 2000s?
2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was just making beats every day, 2, 3, 4 beats a day, me dumping those beats, like recording all those beats. And then from there, like tracking them out and then putting them on beat CDs and sending out beat CDs all over the place.
Sure.
Meanwhile, they had like a label deal, so they had a few artists that they were signing, and I was basically the only person that was in there recording. I mean, they're off traveling the country, selling music, working with other artists. So it really gave me a chance to like kind of hone my craft as like a boot camp almost. And then once they got like a publishing deal, then we started getting studio time with like major artists all over the globe. And then Hated to Love It came out, and New York came out, and then Hated to Love It, and then all these it was like a little bit of a run. And once you got like a #1 record, it was off to the races. Like, so everybody wants to work. Everybody wants
the phone is ringing off the hook.
Exactly.
And that was a beautiful time too. I remember that era like it was yesterday.
No, it definitely was a time when I feel like we just really, once you get into that stride and that era was good because there was like the 50 Cents, you know what I mean? It was like a changing of the guard going into this into where we are today. We went from like having the Biggies and the Pacs, and then there was like a space and time, and then J and then M, and that kind of it stayed that way for a while. And then like I'll never forget when we were in the studio cooking up beats, and I think they might have been making like the beat for Hated to Love It. We had a TV in there, and Country Grammar.
I was just gonna say Nelly was huge around that time.
Country Grammar was like it, and it was like a new sound, and we were just looking at the TV like it was good because everybody was kind of doing their thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was like everybody wasn't trying to chase the same sound. Almost, I hate to say, but that's kind of what's going on today. It's a little bit different because everybody had their own little region. Everybody had their own sound. And now it's a little bit different, but it was definitely like we felt comfortable doing our own thing. Like these guys, and I gotta give my hats off to them because these guys were producing records for people all over the country using samples and stuff like that when chopping up samples in ways that the rest of the culture wasn't really on yet. You know what I mean? When you listen back to the soul records and how they were chopping it up, it wasn't like that aggressive New York sound like a Just Blaze, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that funk, that slap funk that you got like on the West Coast. You know what I mean? And it was sampled. So it wasn't that down south Texas Houston sound. It was really Miami style, because Miami, our parties were basically playing records and then playing them fast and
Yes.
adding the influence that we had from like the Luther Campbells and the JT
Right.
Moneys, you know what I mean? So
95 South and 69 Boys.
right. So we were adding that slap and that bass that we got from
Right.
like DJ Uncle Al and Magic Mike and all that. We were adding that to the
I
soul
grew up
samples.
listening to DJ Laz. DJ
Okay,
Laz.
yeah.
Yeah,
Power 96, big time.
that booty popping stuff.
Oh yeah, he was South Florida's, like, you know, if you think of Hot 97, and Funk Flex, DJ Laz was the Latino Funk Flex
Yes.
of Miami.
He was huge.
He ran it, and he ran
yeah.
it. You know what I mean? Before the Khaled's came in, he was, that was 96. Power 96 was it.
Yeah, so, he was that dude for sure.
So it was pretty cool to have that kind of influence and then come up with like people like Pitbull and Ross. All of these people used to come and record in Cool's house. You know what I mean? Like, or
wow.
to come and get, you know what I mean? And to see it kind of go from there, and then
to what they are now.
Yeah, to building a relationship with like the Pitbulls, the Khaled's, the Ross, you know what I mean? It's just it's kind of beautiful to see like the legacy that was left, you know what I mean?
So how long was the span of time where you kind of like started working with them up until pretty much where you are now? Like, how long was that run?
It was about a good 10 to 15 years. So around 2000, I would say like around 2015 was when I kind of hit a place where I was, I guess you could say, like, you know, in the beginning, it was all passion, right? It was all new, and it wasn't work, right? And then there was a space in time when it started almost feeling like work, and I was, you know, of course, you know, with the labels and everything and the industry kind of changing, and it went from me being like 90% working with record labels and then budgets drying up because of digital and people not knowing how to monetize that,
right?
Into then it was like 90%, you know, labels and 10% independence, to all of a sudden now is 90% independence and 10% labels.
Right.
And I always tell people this, that the one thing I kind of feel was what the labels were able to do back then, if for good and for bad, was curate. I think that they curated talent, and you kind of got where if something came out of one label, it was a sound, it was a direction. Think of like how Motown and everything. Think about how like Motown had a sound, right? Like, because they were bringing people in and cultivating that sound. Whereas once they started breaking away from that and started just giving independence, whether it was like publishing deals or partnership deals, and getting their hands off of it, what that allowed them to do was they were no longer curating it. So everything was coming in, and it was only the things that would break through this wild west of digital music that would start to like kind of climb. And because it was such a wild west, everybody started following whatever trajectories were going on. I don't think people give like Soulja Boy as much credit as he deserves. You know what I mean?
You say Jay says this all the time.
I say this all the time. Say what you want about Soulja Boy, but he really broke the mold when it comes to putting out his music and really promoted himself and using platforms like MySpace at the time, ringtones, to get his music out there.
Do you guys remember? I probably don't. There was a BET Awards. It might have been a Hip Hop Awards or BET Awards, and this was like the year of Soulja Boy, and they had KRS-One kind of walking the carpet, and somebody interviewed KRS-One and was like, KRS-One, what do you think of this new ringtone rap? And KRS-One was like, yo, did you hear what she just said? She said ringtone rap. She said, watch what you give names to, because it becomes a thing.
Right.
And it really did, from ringtone rap, and people were actually making millions of dollars making a song for a ringtone.
Yeah.
To where we are now. Yeah. So where now we are, we're streaming. Like everything is, when's the last time you guys bought a physical CD or bought, like, there's no need for it, right?
If I do, it's like at a thrift store or something. It's not like a new album. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about like you were there from the times of studios and the relevance of a studio, A&Rs, curating an artist, putting the full package together, and then, you know, Napster and streaming was a bad thing, and the music industry didn't know how to navigate that. And then you have Apple Music, who was like, no, this is how you do it. And then you have Jimmy Iovine being like, yeah, no, he's right.
Right,
and then you saw the shift to the streaming, and now streaming is everything. What do you think are, like, I guess the best thing to come from the stream, where we're at right now as far as streaming? What's the best thing that's happened for artists?
I think the best thing I could say that's happened is I think it takes a level of the politics out of it. You know, like I said, for good or bad, the labels were curating, but they were also like gatekeepers. Like you only got people like Wu-Tang and everything like that when they broke through, and labels didn't have a choice but to put money behind it because the streets were calling for it.
Yeah.
But now any kid with a microphone and Fruity Loops and a beat machine, you know, if the talent is still there, they can create something that resonates with kids in a way, and they don't need these labels anymore. So I remember Prodigy said once, if you want to be famous, sign a record deal. If you want to be rich, be an independent. And I think that even today, it still kind of holds true. Like when you look at artists like Russ, right, who put out, I don't know how many albums he put out before people actually knew who he was. It might have been 10 albums that he put out before people knew who he was. And then labels, and then when it was time for, like, he grabbed that attention, he never signed with a deal. He never signed a deal. So that just made that now that he's getting that attention and people are now caught on to like people like Russ, and they go back through their catalog and they're streaming all these old albums because he owns 100% of it. He is, I mean, he's killing the game. Like people like that are killing the game now. When you think of that type of mindset where you're running a marathon, where you're saying to yourself,
yeah,
I'm not trying to find this instant thing, because it's still possible. Like if you put out a TikTok video right now and it goes viral, there are going to be people knocking at your door like, hey, we want to help you.
Yeah.
But really what they're saying is, hey, we want to bring you into this building so that you can generate capital for everybody else that's in this building.
Right.
And so I think right now we're in a great space because of the level of getting rid of those gatekeepers and people being able to monetize their own thing. You know, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, I may not like what my 11-year-old son likes, but my mom didn't like what I was listening to. You know what I mean? So I can't judge what takes off and what doesn't. I think what was a complex of somebody just put out this article that said that the hottest artists going into 2021, and they were all people who had hits on TikTok.
Right.
And it's crazy. Like now they're playing the songs on the radios, and I don't know the song until the viral TikTok part comes out.
Right.
And it's like, oh, Corvette. Oh, that's it. Oh,
or you may know the song, but you don't know the artist. Like,
right.
Yeah, for sure.
Parallels to it. Yeah.
It's such a great disconnect. Please.
So let's transition into, so that was about a good 10-year, maybe a 12-year span that you were doing it. And you said you kind of like, it started to become work and not passion. And we all kind of can relate to that, right? You first start doing something that you really love, and then you're like, oh my God, I'm doing this, and this is starting to be more of a job than anything. So you kind of stopped, but you never lost your passion for music, correct?
Right.
And here we are, and you at some point decided that you were going to write a book. So talk to me a little bit about saying, like, because you were done, and then like you woke up one day and said, I'm going to write a book about it. Like, how did that happen?
What happened was, like, I think everything ebbs and flows, right? Everything kind of goes through this roller coaster ride. And I get these highs and these lows. Like I get a high when I hear something on the radio that's crazy and it's inspiring, right? Like,
right.
But I was hearing a record on the radio. This was maybe about 4 years ago. I was hearing a record on the radio that I heard the producer's name on the tag on it. I was like, oh, I know those producers, and the record was huge. You know what I mean? I mean, it was oh, I can't even think of it now. It was a Wale record, and I was like, oh shoot, they produced something for Wale. So, and it just so happens that one of the producers texted me and was like, bro, we got a top 10 record on the Hot 100 R&B, and we really owe it all to you. And the reason why he said that was because during that whole 10, 15-year time, I would come across interns, I would come across assistants, I would come across new producers, and I would always, give them whatever gems, I had. Like, I was always very transparent with, if I learned something, I want to show you, you know what I mean? And there were these two producers I really kind of, I taught them how to dump their beats. I taught them like how to mix it a little bit and basically how to sequence and everything like that. And they took the ball with that and ran with it. And fast forward 10 years, we're now getting placements with major artists, and they wanted to say that they wouldn't have been able to do any of that without me. And I did it all for nothing. And it was like the biggest reward in the world to me. Like, it just made me start thinking about all these other people that I kind of just followed along over the years. Like, I remember there was a kid, he was asking me, should he go to Full Sail? And the funny thing, he was asking me this at Circle House Studios. It was it's one of the best studios in Miami, if not the best studio in Miami. But I was like, so you're not an engineer, you're not an assistant or anything like that. How are you here? In the studio right now talking to me? He was like, well, my mom knows the owners. I'm kind of just like, hanging out or whatever. And I was like, well, bro, I mean, if you're here, you might as well just get an internship here, skip the Full Sail route. And, because Full Sail's expensive. Like, any of those recording programs are super expensive. I was like, you're already in the door. Like, you might as well just use the relationship that you have, because this business is all relationships into doing what you're doing. And he did, you know what I mean? And and then from there, he went from being an intern to an assistant to engineering his own sessions to actually getting hired by another studio on Miami Beach to be their studio manager / chief engineer. So to like watch that growth and progression happen for somebody, that it all kind of started with, him saying to me like, bro, thank you so much. Like, I'm here because of you. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a crazy reward that I started to figure out where what was missing from me. And what was missing from me wasn't like a check or the money. What was missing was actually like giving somebody something that could help them find their own dreams and their own passions. And that's when I decided that I would start, teaching audio. And I wanted to get my thoughts across in a way that was once presented to me, right, from like Full Sail, like that formal type of education. But at the same time, it was the mentors and all the studio engineers and studio managers that helped me along in the process, that really gave me, helped me create my own formula, my own workflow. So that's why I just started putting all my ideas on paper. And I just wanted to make it in a way that was kind of straightforward, that would give a young me, somebody like a 20-year-old me, like the confidence, give them the game and the confidence to just hit the ground running and go. So
yeah,
this is almost like a textbook, if you can say. Like, you even start like with the equipment, the sound, your mic, you have like lesson 2 is gear. So you're talking about microphones, you're talking about the EQs, the dynamics. This is kind of like almost like a how-to guide, almost, if you want to say, right? Almost like you can kind of skip the Full Sail part and kind of read the book. Would you say that?
That I would look. I don't think that, what I try to do is, if Full Sail was something that you were interested in doing, like, I went to school, I think the class I went to started out with like 30, 45 kids in it. And by the end of the 2 years that I was there, it dwindled down to 15.
Yeah.
And out of those 15, I would think that, let me see, with the cats that I graduated with, out of those 15, maybe 5 went on to actually the The 15 all tried to go do it, but only 5 stuck with it. And
Okay.
the first 85 or the first 85% of the kids that were in that class, they dumped it or didn't really have an interest in it because they didn't know what they were getting into. So what I wanted to do was at least give you a taste, give you the basic information, the basics that you can get, facts, terminology, um, what it is that what you're gonna in this program, this profession, this craft that you're gonna go into, so that you could decide for yourself whether it's something that you want to do. You know what I mean? And if you do want to do it, well, I've given you basically a blueprint to how it went from A to Z, like what sound is, what your ears are doing, to what are the different parameters, whether it's frequency, how that frequency gets in through the gear that we're using, how we wire and connect that gear. And in there, a little bit of history, like we used to use a tape machine. Now we use computers. This is how it went from being tape machine to computers. So I wanted to give you that much, that way that you can easily say, well, number one, I could go and use this information to, if I wanted to just skip paying the 30, 40, 50 grand that it is now, and then put that into building my own, then I have a good foundation in which I could do that. And now that I have all this information, if a person just takes about 4 weeks and goes through that book, which isn't big, it's like 100 pages, but if they take about 4 weeks to go through that book, they will then have the questions that they would know what questions to ask. So they would then be able to, I mean, because the internet's full of information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like they could easily now say, but you can also, because it's full of information, you could go down this rabbit hole, like, and you kind of forget what you first were looking for in the first place. So, but if you at least know enough about it to have the right questions, like, okay, now I understand what a compressor is, what these knobs do, how can I get my sound to do this? And then you can easily find that information. You know what I mean? So I really wanted to do that for somebody, give them an opportunity to skip spending their money or their parents' money or taking out these student loans when the world is full of information now. So I'm hopefully that's how it's received. Hopefully, like the two people that get it, hopefully they take.
It'll be more than 2 people that will get it. I'm sure. So your online presence is big. That was definitely something that I saw that you started out doing. And one of the things that I noticed that you did that was dope was it was like you listened past the artist, right? Most people, when they listen to a song, they're just trying to hear how the artist sounds and what the and can they really sing or can they really rap, right? So a lot of your videos were very intentional about talking about the quality of the sound of the track and what the engineer actually does. Talk a little bit about why you believe that the engineer is never really talked about through this process of making a song. We always talk about the artist, of course, and then we talk about the producer because they made the beat per se, but we never talk about the person who makes it sound right. And why do you think the engineer is lost in that process?
I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of engineers, in my experience, are listeners. You know, number one, I think like a lot of technical people and people who are in the technical support roles, whether it's TV, film, audio, whatever it is, like you've got, if you're in a room, right, and it's a creative space, right, you've got the person that is kind of orchestrating everything, right, like the producer, right, you've got the talent, right, the artist, who I guess you could consider like the product. But if everybody in here has been in any kind of business, you know that you also need the marketing person. You also need the person that is the technical person, whether it's a website or wherever, you need that person who's going to code for you, or you need that person that knows how to print. Like if you're going into like a t-shirt business or something, like you need those type of people in order to make the whole machine work, right? And
Right.
engineers, I kind of feel, are like, because it's the most technical. And to be honest with you, my wife will tell you, like, she's been on hundreds of sessions with me where everybody else is in that creative space. So they're like they're over poolside, drinking, getting in that zone, drinking mimosas and just like, living that rock star lifestyle, while the engineer is over in the corner sweating, putting everything together, translating all of that creativity that's in the air into something that is like tangible, something that's a product. So they're usually so busy that they're often forgotten about. But if you think about like a director, right? Everybody knows who like a Zack Snyder is, or who like a Stephen King is, right? But when you're
Right.
watching that movie, you're watching, the direction of that movie, you're watching the editing and everything like that, but you're not thinking about the cinematographer who picked out the color, right? Or who picked out those angles just right how the director wanted it. You're not
Yeah.
thinking about the movie editor who actually makes or breaks the movie. Like,
Right.
if you see right now, like, I think they're about to do it with Justice League. Right now, you're going to get the Snyder version of what that movie would be like. So the people that hated Justice League may see it totally different through
Right.
Snyder's editing. You know what I mean? So those technical people are always kind of like bypassed. You know what I mean?
Is it
Yeah.
also fair? Is it also fair to say, because the engineers, they're not necessarily on the record. Like, you have the artists who, obviously they're doing their thing, singing, rap, or whatever. But also you have like a producer tag that's like Jalil Beats, or Timbaland, or someone who's heavy on the record. But then you also have the one that's mixing, who's probably the most important part. That's probably why you don't really know what they do, or when you look at the back of a CD case or whatever, and you read, what is this? That's
Right,
probably one of the reasons, right? Like, they're not on the record.
I mean, you got to give Jay-Z props for shouting out Guru the way he did, right? Nobody really knew what the hell an engineer was until he said, Guru, play the beat. Guru, turn me up in the headphones. And then it's like, oh, if Jay-Z's talking about this person, then that might be something I want to do. Like, you know what I mean? Which is great. Like, I love it.
Listen, I'm trying to tell you, like, I've been around enough music in my life to know, listen to a raw edit of a song before it's final mix down, and you'll know the importance of an engineer. Like, shit be trash.
It be sounding crazy.
Let's just keep it on. Just keep it 100. Like, keep it 100. Like, I mean, you also.
And it's also,
go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I listen. I watch a lot of documentaries on music, and I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen this, but Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, he did a documentary called Sound City, and it was basically on the Sound City studios, and basically he did a whole documentary on Sound City Studios in LA, and like some of the most important records in pop, rock, whatever history came from that little shitty studio. Yeah. But like a lot of the sound engineers, they were guys that were just there, like cleaning up shit, and then they would just stay after hours. So I feel like the sound engineer position is a position where you kind of have to want to do it, and put in those hours. You don't necessarily go to school for it, but if you're around the studio every day and you're learning what the producers do, what the artists do, then you're like, oh, I know how this is supposed to sound, or I know how the drums in this room is gonna sound against the drums in the room in Studio B or whatever. Like, it's a lot of. I feel like it's a lot of that too.
It's definitely something where it's like, it's an egoless type of role, and if you let the ego, if you let the glitz and the glamour and the accolades of the talent and the producers that's in the room, if you let that get to you, it can make, like, I've gone to studios where engineers aren't treated. See, some people may say, like, I had a because of the relationships I had a little bit of an easier route, because I was able to be in the rooms with people that people who had been interning or something for how many ever years that they were, hadn't gotten the opportunity to be in. So I would say half of that stuff is based on like relationships, but I had to work my ass off. Like, I still had to, like, when I mean the thousands and thousands of hours that I put into the room with every artist that you could think of, every different personality type, you have to be egoless, because the egos, they
outweigh everybody else.
Like, if you think artists and stuff like that are like divas, like, some of these producers will throw your head, like, especially back then when budgets were huge. Like,
yes,
when an artist had like $1 million budget, they would, get the best of the best. And these guys have writers. We need to have blue M&Ms over here, or these candles need to be lit just right. I'm not gonna call out any producers' names, but there was one producer that I know that, number one, I couldn't believe we were in a session a couple doors down, but this producer had to have the whole room, no fluorescent lights. It had to be all candlelight. And boy had doves. Like, he needed doves. And
like the bird? Like
the birds. And the studio, like, knowing this was like the studio, like, got these doves, like, you hire doves, like, you get some doves for your wedding or whatever.
Yeah.
This guy had to have the doves just ready, just like in the cage, like when he felt that emotion hit him,
to be released,
to free the doves.
Jay is
right?
trying to figure out who it is.
I'm trying to be like, who's the...
But I'll say this. So here's the funny thing, right? The funny part of the story was, and I don't know if the producer knows this, but the doves that were there waiting for him were the second set of doves, because the studio, it was like they had a studio, like a dog that would, when the studio is empty, like it was like a guard dog that they would let out at night or whatever.
Yeah.
They got the doves the night before, and the dog got in the cage
and fucked them all up.
So they had to go and get more doves?
They had to go get more doves before the 4K.
Wow, what?
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say about, like, the egos. Like, there's, like, it could be so crazy. It's so many crazy. Like, hey, if you want some real studio stories, talk to the engineer. They will tell you all the like. I've been in studios.
How do you work in a room with no lights, with all candles? Like, and you're trying to record them.
You figure it out, right?
That's how many candles had to be in there. Like, you have, like, that's how many candles had to be in there. And then when the producer leaves, like, because he's got to go out, he's got to walk around the premises, he's got to catch that vibe. You turn on your little light. You know what I mean? And then you just have the assistant or whatever standing over there and say, hey, when he's about to come back, you can kill it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Is not this is the thing. This is not the artist. This is just the producer.
No. This is just a producer. Some of the artists can get their own little way, but I'm more comfortable at this point, and at that point in my career, I had seen everything, and I didn't. And so, like, I would learn how to, like, make it a cohesive relationship based on like being able to, like, work work with certain as artists are tricky. Well, as long as you make an artist feel comfortable, then they don't care about anything else. So
tell us if you. No, go ahead. No, you finish your thought.
No, I'm gonna ask the question.
So if you can tell us, no, seriously, if you can tell us, because we never ask compromising questions here. We don't do that, right? But if you can tell us, and if you remember, who was one of your most favorite artists to work with? Like, that it was like always like a vibe, and you always
easy to work with,
working with them, easy to work with.
Oh man, so
that we wouldn't think that it would be an easy person to work with.
So I'll play it like this. Whoever you think is probably difficult to work with is difficult to work with.
Okay.
People, but there are two people that come to mind that maybe some people would be intimidated thinking that something would happen. One would be Keisha Cole, right? There's this energy out there that maybe she's like, difficult in some kind of ways, but she's definitely one of the most easy to talk to, like, easygoing person. You know what I mean? The other, I would say, and probably my favorite, and I consider him like a brother, and he's actually my spades partner, is Fat Joe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you've got the Terror Squad, so you've got goons on the facility.
Like
at
OGs.
all times. Like,
yes.
I mean, I gotta say, like, I think I probably would have been a little bit more nervous if Big Pun was around, because I heard some, trust me, I've heard some Terror Squad stories.
Yeah.
But Crack himself is so personable, so, like, easy to work with. because he just wants to get in, do what he got to do, and get out. But there's been so many, like, and then favorites is like, Crack is definitely one of my favorites. Something that was truly humbling for me, and what I was like, I felt a blessing to be involved in was, I think maybe it was like LL Cool J's last album.
Okay.
And it was because
I mean, he's a pioneer. Like he's been in the game for a long time. I
mean, to hear somebody who you've grown up hearing, to then be in the room with them, and it was an experience that I'll never forget. And it was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned was, so I was working on this project, and then he said something to me like after recording. He said, "Yeah, take that and do this and do that." And when I hit play, I had already done it. And he was like, "Yo, you're fast, like you're good." And in that moment right there, instead of me saying, of course, I was like, "Hey, thank you, I appreciate that." But really, what I was supposed to say was, I am. You should probably have me work on the rest of your music for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Right.
Instead of like doing that, what I kind of grew up and what we all grow up, we're all always taught be humble, be this, be that. Being humble and being confident are two different things. So if anybody's hearing me out on this, just understand one of the biggest lessons I learned was not self-promoting myself at the right time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was go ahead, Laura.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off. I want you to finish that thought.
Yeah.
No, finish the thought.
Oh, so basically that was definitely a lesson that I learned that I think a lot of greats do. Like when you hear Khaled say "we the best," right? I'll never forget right before he started putting out his own music. People, he was already like producing some records. Like he's like a real producer. I know a lot of people don't think he is, but he's like a real producer. Like, he can make a beat. You know what I mean? And he has to be. He's probably the best DJ, like the best DJ party that I've ever been to is a DJ Khaled party. So skilled in all of that. But I remember when he was in a room of people telling them, "Yo, I'm gonna put out an album. Like I'm gonna put out at the time there was like DJ Drama, and he was putting out these drama mixtapes and everything. He's like, "Yo, I'm gonna put out." Exactly, but he was like, I'm gonna put out, I'm gonna put mine out. And there was some skepticism in the room.
Really?
And I would never forget it.
That must have been a long time ago.
It was before his first mixtape. It was before the We the Best.
We the Best.
We the Best, #1.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if nobody really not nobody, but there was some skepticism in the room. And he was like, "Watch, I'm gonna show you. And it was ever since then he had that. I mean, the Khaled you see is Khaled. There is no doubt about it. Like whether he's in his house, I've worked with him in his house. I've worked with him in other studios. I heard him on the radio. I mean, I've known DJ Khaled since like 1996. That is him, 100%. And it kind of, for some people, it's off-putting, right? It's like, oh, that's like a lot, it's all ego, it's all this, it's all that. But in truth, what it is he's speaking his life into existence. He is
manifestation.
He's personifying exactly who he is. And the energy that's around him, he doesn't let it infiltrate him. And so that is definitely like when I learned, like watching that, and then people always say, I can't believe, it's pretty ego to say that we the best. Doesn't realize that when you look at the Arabic word for God, right? If you look at it clearly, it's a W, right? And it's a W and an I. But if you look at it, it's we, you know what I mean? So what he's really trying to say to people is God's the best without giving that away in a way that is, so it has all this different meaning to it. But what people see on the surface, what people see on the internet, and what I always learned was masses of the asses. Like I'll never go with what just, the trolls may go with, you know what I mean? But when you think about a person and you hear that type of stuff, you then see things differently. And so you don't see things as being this grandiose persona that's not real. Like that is really that person. He's never done or hurt anybody. And people,
he just worked hard.
He just worked hard, harder than
So
everybody.
I feel like it's a lot of artists, especially in like the South. You think about Atlanta, like Ludacris when he started Chris Lova Lova, or
Yeah,
even Lil Jon. Like they
Yeah.
all started radio, humble beginnings, throwing parties, and then they made a name for themselves. But they were really that person. Like that
yeah,
was them. And you're gonna have those people who are gonna be like skeptical or kind of just shitting on them. But then when they really pop off, they want to be the ones to be like, "Yo, I was there with him when he said it" or whatever. But it's like, come on, man. But it's kind of like you can even go back to Jimmy Iovine. Like Jimmy Iovine was at the right place at the right time when they needed a sound engineer for
Yeah.
John Lennon's debut album. He was like, "Yo, it's on Easter. Nobody else is available. Can you come?" He was like, "Yeah, come."
yeah.
They didn't tell him who it was. It was John Lennon.
Right,
That was his first thing that he ever sound like mixed on.
right.
So you got
Then
to just
Bruce,
be ready for that stuff.
absolutely, Bruce Springsteen, like another one that he is just like nobody. He worked with Bruce Springsteen before everybody knew who Bruce Springsteen was. Like
Right.
Stevie Nicks, like all these crazy people that he was just like you said, in the right. And then he kind of stuck it out. Really, what happened was he
Right.
wanted to quit. Like, and they
Yes.
were like, "You better bring your ass back to the studio."
Because artists are they're a lot. And
Yeah, man.
especially Bruce Springsteen, they would go over sounds thousands and thousands of times before they even record a song. And then they record the
Yeah,
song thousands and thousands of times to the point where the tape
yeah,
is worn out. And this is tape, this is reel to
yeah,
reel.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
it's it's crazy. Like you gotta have that relentless and resilience to
Yeah,
be in this
exactly,
business.
exactly.
So
Super
before
persevere.
we wrap up, there's a couple other things I wanted to touch on. So also what you do a lot online is you give your ear hustling tips. And it's some stuff that you don't even see in the book. So where do you get those tips from, and why do you think the certain ones that you bring out are important?
So before you were talking about my I called it listening to the best series, where I really wanted to give people that perspective from what I hear as if I was in that room, be experiencing that, an engineer would be doing, right? And also wanted to give engineers their flowers, because you were mentioning how, a lot of, they're like the unsung heroes of the room, right? So I definitely wanted to highlight and give people that exposure to what, is something different. And same thing with ear hustling tips. I think about maybe mistakes that I made or things that I learned along the way in my career that may get overlooked, or somebody may not think about it from that perspective. And I always wanted to give, people, and the air hustling tips are for people who are really starting to embark on that air hustling journey, as I like to call it, like that journey of, being, they say the smartest guy in the room is the one that's listening the most, right? So I wanted to give engineers a perspective, or somebody who's working or even thinking about music, a perspective on how to look at something that is almost like an unspoken thing, right? Like I think I remember one of the ones that I did that I got a little bit of critique for was, how do you charge? How are you charging your clients? Because it's almost like an unspoken thing, especially in our culture, because you can almost still say that we learned everything by doing. There wasn't a trickle down of information for us. Like there was a huge disconnect. Nobody respected our music as far as like this hip hop culture goes. Nobody respected it, and we all just learned and mastered it by doing. But there were some things that get missed, right? Like if it wasn't for a studio manager telling me what other engineers are charging, that and help me build up my own price structure, then who knows where I would be in there, right? So when I see engineers doing things like, and it's to give other people and there's no real union for us, you know what I mean? Because everybody's so independent. There are unions out there, like in LA
But you're
and New
still
York.
providing a service, though.
Exactly. But think about it, and you have to think about it. Like I try to give them an idea of, you have to, and I really learned that one of my teachers asked that question when I was at Full Sail. He was like, and he wasn't even like, he was a sound reinforcement teacher. He was teaching us like how to wire things, like how to solder, what circuits are, what resistors are, right? Like, so he was teaching us like super technical stuff, but he was also one of the guys who had the early patent on the beep, like the vibrators that's in beepers. So his mentality was, oh yeah, you can learn how to do this and charge $45 an hour to do this. Or you can learn how to calibrate a tape machine and charge $150 an hour. Like, he was giving us that kind of real conversation, that when we got out, we kind of got an idea as to what to charge people. And if you don't go through that process or have those people, how would you know that? So those are the type of things I use when I'm trying to put out like tips for people. Like, think about how much you're going to charge somebody, or think about like when they're off creating or they're off writing, like that's not playtime for you. That's the time for you to get so busy and get your game so tight that when they come back in the room, like you're not the bottleneck. You're not the one holding up everything, right? Like if you get all that stuff down, then you become one of the greats. You become one of the masters. And if I had that information from day one, who knows, like, how many times I may have been on stage thanking everybody for,
right.
for everything. So
no, but
that.
So, but I'm sure you appreciate the process and where you are, and now the book and everything. So, who should get this book, and why, and where can they get it?
Sure. So, if you are interested in audio engineering, if you are interested in any kind of aspects as it comes to sound, this is a great book for you. It even doesn't matter what level or experience you're in. You can be somebody who has been doing it for 10 years. You can still get something out of it. It can still be a good reference point for you. You can always go back and refer to something to get a different look at it. Even in writing it, I've gotten such a new passion, a renewed passion for everything, because now I revisit things, or I work on things from a total different mindset, just on kind of relearning the basics. That here I am 20 years later, and I'm trying to apply things from a different perspective. Or I think about, like I said, the 20-year-old me who was thinking about going to audio school or had an interest in it. I now have something that I can invest in for a penny, as opposed to what it would cost to go to a recording school. You know what I mean? And so that's my approach. If anybody is interested in it, and if, let's say you're thinking about doing, because everybody, if you're in media, you need sound, right? So you think about film, TV, live sound, studio, game design, like all of that requires engineers. Those voiceovers that's on the new Grand Theft Auto, it took somebody sitting in the studio and recording that. You want to do podcasts, audiobooks, radio, it goes, every time you hear something, there was some sound engineer who developed some software or made something that works for that. This is a good place for you guys to start. You can find it on my website, airhustlingmedia.com. You can also find it on Amazon, both the physical and the ebook. I'm planning on releasing a hard copy pretty soon for those who don't like paperback. And I've gotten a couple DMs about an audiobook. Because there's so much like graphic information in there that I want you to see. I'm thinking about how I can make it a good audiobook experience. So cool. That'll be coming up next. And then the next one is really what I'm like, this really got my gears going as to how
I was just about to ask that. Will this be a part 2 of this book?
Yeah, so I do want to make it a series, and in my series, it'll go from this to an advanced AR recording, and then from there, my master class, which I'm looking to do the AR one this year, release it next year, and then the master class is going to be, I don't even want to go into it. It's going to be something special. So
we'll hold that off for the next time.
We'll hold that off for the next time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So where can we find you on social media, or where can people reach out to you if they have questions or just want to follow you to get the tips?
Sure. So you can reach out to me on Instagram. You can go to Brizz, BRIZZ _air_hustling. You can also go to Air Hustling the book on Instagram, and you can do Air Hustling book on Twitter. And you can ask me anything you guys want anytime. I answer most DMs, comments. I answer everything. I get a lot of people ask me questions. Hey bro, how do you you know, I got the sample here. Can you listen to it? What do you think I should do? And stuff like that. I'm so happy to give up that information because I would have wanted somebody to do that for me. So that
That's
anywhere, you know, you could definitely reach out to me.
That's dope. So we want to thank you, Brizz, for being on the show today. This was a great conversation. I know Jay was stoked. I'll let you have it. I had to let you have the run at it, Jay.
We'll have another conversation off camera because I'm just curious about other stuff.
Yeah, man.
No, this is very, very informative. Like, I love music, and like the fact that we have that's been in the industry and done their thing. Like, I love it. So thanks for coming on, man.
No, thank you for having me, guys. This was great. Great questions, great platform. Thanks for letting me talk. I know I can ramble on, so I really appreciate it.
That's what we love about it. We love people who come in and are passionate about what they do. That's the whole purpose of, you know, Learn Relive. We want to talk to all the movers and shakers who are, you know, the expert in their area. And sometimes we just like to talk to people who are doing things that not everyone wants to talk about. So this is definitely something that we wanted to touch on. And you guys, we want you to go and make sure you are following Brizz on all his social media platforms, as well as following us on Learn Relive on Twitter, also on Instagram. All of our handles, they're right here in the box. Also, make sure you guys are following waterice.com. We are your scoop to everything Philly. We have a really huge announcement coming up that I am really, really excited about, that I personally is my baby, and I'm excited to bring it back. And Jay's smiling because he knows it's been like a long time coming, but it's coming back, and I'm excited about it. So please stay tuned to that. Make sure you guys are going to the website and signing up for our newsletter so you know everything that's going on in the area. Jay, am I missing anything?
Just follow waterice.com, your scoop to everything Philly on all the social media platforms. Our merchandise and apparel. Stay tuned for more stuff like that.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, just, you know, follow us. You'll stay in tune to everything.
And we'll be back. And we'll be back next in a couple weeks with another guest. We have some really good shows lined up for this season of the Learn Relive show. So I'm really excited about it. And again, thank you, Brizz, for coming on to the show. And you guys, you know how we end this show always. Jay, please help me out. Not all superheroes wear capes, but sometimes
they wear headphones.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. I had to take mine out. They died.